If you read enough Emily Dickinson poems, you will come across one every once in a while that means absolutely nothing to you. Absolutely nothing at all. It doesn't make any sense. Some of the verbiage is weird. Some of the diction is strange. Some of the line breaks are absolutely nonsensical. And then some time goes on, and you happen back upon that poem. You stumble upon what that poem was, and you realize, oh, there might have been something here. And then the more time you spend with it, the more you realize, oh, there's probably a lot here. And it's not just a lot that's here. It's some stuff that's hard to get away from. Today's poem, for me, was just one of those types of poems. This video is part of 3 separate playlists here on the channel. Number 1 being obviously the Echoes of Emily playlist, but number 2 being a playlist of Emily Dickinson poetry discussions, and third, the general playlist for poetry discussions. If you like or appreciate the work that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing that I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week. So consider hitting the subscribe button to stick around for more literature in the future. I felt a cleaving in my mind, as if my brain had split. I tried to match it seam by seam, but could not make it fit. The thought behind I strove to join unto the thought before, but sequence raveled out of reach like balls upon the floor. What we have here is an interesting poem. I felt a cleaving in my mind. Is this a genuine pain? Or is this a realization as if my brain had split? This could be read as a hemorrhage, perhaps, a real physical happening, or I realized that I was of 2 minds. I tried to match it seam by seam. These 2 different minds that I have, this realization that I have had about something that I held near and dear, but I could not make the old assumption and the new realization fit. I couldn't make them fit. They are different. The thought behind I strove to join. So that old thing that I had, I tried to link it to the new thing, unto the thought before. But sequence raveled out of reach like balls upon the floor. When I tried to do this, everything went to pot. It doesn't fit. Everything is different. Now, these are the moments where we change. So, no matter how you feel about certain parts of what he talks about, I think that there is a little bit of Jordan Peterson for everyone. I really do believe that. And I don't agree with everything that he says, right? So, I think that he's, over how many years he's talked enough on the internet that he's talked about just about everything. But one of the stories that he tells is when he decided to really make himself into something. And he had this realization that nearly everything that came out of his mouth was a lie. You know, not an egregious lie, not a vindictive lie, but you lie to keep conversations going. Sometimes you lie to end a conversation. You get along to get along. And he realized how much of what came out of his mouth was that. And when he decided, I'm not doing that anymore. I can't do that anymore. It's not right. It doesn't lead to anything actually fruitful or productive. He made that decision. And then if he felt the compulsion to lie, one of those little white lies in conversation, he just wouldn't say anything. And he realized that in the back of his mind, even if he was being silent, that little voice was still telling those lies. I think that is there for a lot of people. There was a time in my life where I'm very alternative right, from just sort of the standard. I mean, if you've been here for any period of time, you understand that. But other people's goals, those are your goals. That's not for me. But at a point in my life, my goals don't make sense to anyone else, right? Nobody else wants to sit in front of a computer for 400 straight days and talk into it about poetry. Nobody else wants to do that. So I wouldn't either. And I would make little lies to myself. I would say, oh, well, I really just don't feel good today. It was a little lie to myself. Well, I'll start it tomorrow. I missed my lunch today at work and had to work through it, and I'm just not in the right state of mind. And I wouldn't write, or I wouldn't make a video, or I wouldn't do my reading, or I wouldn't work out, whatever it is. I think that is basically what this poem is about. This realization at some point in our lives that hopefully we get there. And oftentimes I think we need reminding, right? This is not, I don't believe, a one-time thing. We have to constantly be rehumbled to our senses and sensibilities, realizing that we are lying. We didn't have that hard of a day. Maybe we did have to skip lunch. How many people around the world? Did you know? As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner, one of the most difficult books to read, possibly in the English language, and one of the most rewarding, was written while, I might get this wrong, so fact check me. I was not expecting to talk about it. William Faulkner was working overnights in a power plant for a university shoveling coal into a furnace. That's when he wrote As I Lay Dying. So my piddly little 8-hour shift where some Karen threatened to call my boss and a couple drunks came in and tried to get rough and maybe I had to skip my lunch break. That's not working overnight shoveling coal into a furnace. Writing one of the greatest novels of all time, I have to stop lying to myself. And oftentimes I think we realize when that epiphany happens, you're lying to yourself. You'll realize how much you've been lying to other people, too. A lot of lying, I've noticed, is not really lying. It's complaining. Because when we complain about something, oh, this weather is just so awful, what we're doing is we're finding an excuse. And even if we're not finding an excuse, we're not finding the more difficult thing to talk about. The more difficult thing to talk about, which is something positive, which is, what's the old phrase? Small people talk about people. People talk about things, but big people talk about ideas, right? That old saying. And so long as we're talking about other people, we don't have to do the hard work of talking about things, and we certainly don't have to do the terribly difficult work of talking about ideas, right? So I think that this poem is very fitting into that sort of framework. Don't lie to yourself. And I'm saying that I'm chastising myself as I say this. I realize that it sounds condescending when said out loud, but really I mean me. Nihilism. Okay. I've said this time and again in this series, this is one of my favorite quotes ever from Dmitry Pisarev, who was one of the foundational sort of cultural nihilists, a Russian. Here is the ultimatum of our camp. And again, I'm not going to get this perfect either. Here's the ultimatum of our camp. What can be smashed must be smashed. So strike out right, strike out left. What will blow to smithereens was no good. What will stand the blow was good. Either way, no harm will or can come of it. So do the smashing, right? This poem is about a worldview that did not withstand the blow. Now, our speaker herein decided to try to put that worldview back to use, but was very, very clearly corrected by the world itself. And that's one of the genius parts of this poem that is maybe underrated. But sequence raveled out of reach like balls upon the floor. We're talking about a natural progression. You drop something, it falls to the floor and rolls away. Just like your broken worldview will. Natural forces will tear it away from you. So what I think is happening here is this worldview did not withstand the blow. Our speaker came to a realization that crashed her entire worldview, and it's rolling away from her. She cannot put it back together. She should not try. Hauntology. Hauntology is concerned with how the past manifests in the present, how the past will haunt us, how the past will shape the way that things are done now. Is it possible that this is not a worldview that is striking our speaker? Is it possible that this is instead actually the past? Maybe it's a realization about the past, that much is possible as well, but it is something from the past which is causing an which is forming an intrusion into the now, that cleaving in the mind, that is an intrusion of the past in the present. And it is forcing a difference all the livelong day. That is a hauntological idea, that this thing, this happening from the past should reoccur to our speaker and cause the change in them. I felt a cleaving in my mind, as if my brain had split. I tried to match it seam by seam, but could not make it fit. The thought behind I strove to join unto the thought before, but sequence raveled out of reach like balls upon the floor.